All right, YouTube, we're back to doing some hot takes for Overwatch. We're in the mid-season 20 right now. We're a few weeks away from the big season 21, so some of these hot takes are probably a little bit older. I haven't done it in a while, but make sure to leave some fresh hot takes in the comments. We'll add them to the giant pool that I shuffle through in no particular order. The first one we pulled up this week is hot take. I seriously hate how comp-focused Overwatch is. Like, how a mode can be completely removed from rotation and not have a new map added for it since it was just released, just because comp players whined a lot. I'm talking about Clash mode. While quick play, Escort, and hybrid, one of the most unfair modes, is allowed to stay in rotation, just baffles me. I mean, I think for the longest time, Overwatch was juggling with their identity. Were they a truly casual hero shooter or they want to lean more competitive? And I actually like the fact that they leaned more competitive in recent years. They put their foot down, they added hero bans, map picks, removed some really problematic game modes that weren't fun in competitive, which was Clash, 2CP, etc, etc. So I disagree with this. I think being comp focused is a good direction to lean in. They were on the opposite side of the spectrum for a very long time and the game was going down, and I think the game has had a big resurgence in the past year simply because of these new additions and dialing in for the competitive experience, and that kind of trickles down to the other modes. Now, that being said, just because we take something away, it doesn't mean we have to automatically replace it. What if the replacement product is not as good as the other one? So if we remove Clash, did you want like another game mode to replace it? What if that one's not good? I'd counter argue that we actually have enough maps and strong game modes already in the game. Or sorry, we have enough game modes already. Clash was a brand new game mode they added. I just don't think it worked. And I think just adding more maps to the 5 existing modes, which is Flashpoint, Push, Hybrid, Escort, and Control, I don't know if I'm missing one, is a good place to continue going. Excuse me. There's already like 40, 50 something maps in the game, and that's plenty for a new player to experience. And there's enough in there to keep things fresh when you queue into Overwatch, in my opinion. And the last part, you talked about Escort and Hybrid being the most unfair. I don't really understand where this is coming. I mean, you didn't really elaborate on why you think it's unfair, but I disagree. I think those are some of the more favored ones. I think it's perfectly fine because you get to switch sides. Maybe in quick play, not so much because you only play one side, so it might feel a little unfair in that aspect, but that's what you're going for. You're just playing quick play, so there's no time for both. There's also another argument for a while that we should have a unranked casual mode where it's like a competitive rule set, so you could switch sides. Well, actually, I don't think it would be a bad thing necessarily. Maybe the argument is that they would fragment the player base even more and people can't get fast queue times and people are just queuing all over the place. And if you're stuck in a quick play competitive mode where you get to play both sides, what if someone has to leave? You just have to sit there and just have a bad experience over the next 10-15 minutes because somebody decided to leave after one bad first half. I feel like that's going to happen, and I can't predict the future. That's just my what I think is the logic behind Blizzard not adding a mode like that. But it could be one of those we should just try it, and then if that happens to be the case, then we'll bin it later. But I don't think it's really going to take away resources if they do add competitive casual. So yeah. Hot take: Widow and Ashe are not a counter pick to Pharah. If you take her mobility perks, she can close the distance to them in a heartbeat with her combo and absolutely melt them in a second. Map Tracer or Genji is a much stronger counter to Pharah because they have unpredictable movements and force her to waste weapon and abilities while they can draw out a battle. If you are losing to a sniper as Pharah constantly, you are playing her wrong. Okay, there are some parts that I agree with and some I disagree with. These are some interesting takes here. Let's unpack this. Widow and Ashe are not a counter pick to Pharah. Maybe we shouldn't use the word counter pick or the term counter pick. We should use a strong answer. One of the few options and answers to Pharah. Burst, hit scan, always good as long as they're within the fall off range. Widow, not so much a problem. Ashe, if they're playing really far, it doesn't actually do too much to Pharah. Now, like you said, if you take Pharah's mobility perks and you can close the distance on them in a heartbeat, yes, of course. That's how you're supposed to play into that matchup as Pharah. If you can sneak and find your way in the airspace to get on top of them, that is one way to counter the counter. But if the Pharah is playing in open airspace, then inherently picking Widow and Ashe are options, and I'm going to use the term counterpick because it kind of forces you not to be able to play in open airspace for free. Let's say the other team hypothetically didn't have Ashe and Widow and they just had Junkrat and Mei. You are much more free to roam around in space you probably couldn't take if you had to deal with hit scans on the other team. Does that make sense? They are counters to them in that sense. Now, the next part, Bap, Tracer, or Genji is a much stronger counter to Pharah. I mean, Bap is one of the better choices on board if you want to pressure her in the sky as a hit scan option. For me, when I play a lot of Bap, if I could just shoot the Pharah, even just for like 50 damage in the distance thanks to fall off, it's enough to kind of deter her from flying into open space. Tracer, no. Genji, no. Like those are very hard heroes to deal with Pharah. I don't think they're counter to Pharah at all. You say they're strong counter to Pharah because they're unpredictable. They're hard for you to hit, but they don't counter you per se. That just means you just don't shoot them. Tracer and Genji actually it's very hard for them to shoot a good Pharah who's like maintaining good aerial space and ducking behind cover, because it's a little out of range to reliably hit. Like Tracer's gonna have crazy fall off. Genji's gotta hit projectile shurikens in the sky. Like, yeah, no. Now that last part, if you are losing to a sniper as Pharah constantly, you are playing her wrong. Partially agree. As Pharah, you can certainly play around the sniper by, being a bit more sneaky and stuff like that. But yeah, some of your points were, I can see where you're coming from, but I mostly disagree with your take. All right, next hot take. Bring back Cassidy's original Flashbang. May got her freeze back, and it has not ruined anything. Instead, it has made her a lot more viable in the meta. Every new hero since Overwatch 2 has had some kind of movement ability, and with 5v5 battles are a lot more chaotic. They could make it a tier 2 perk where he can choose between that or the ADS ability. Oh, like the and the hammer or the silver bullet or whatever you call it, right? It would really help his playstyle because he has no movement perk and could give options between an up-close dueler or a long-range specialist. It also works perfectly with the perk system. It gives him a chance to nerf something else like fan the hammer output, damage output, since unlike Overwatch 1, perks allow them to bring abilities back while nerfing others without making any one part of the kit OP. Now, I actually don't think this is a hot take. I actually agree with this. In the vacuum, when Overwatch 2 first came out, I think removing Flashbang was the correct play, but now there's a lot more inherent abilities being added to the game thanks to perks and different power spikes. I think adding it as a tier 2 perk, for sure, a major perk, because it's not always going to be online in every single game. It takes a while to build up, and then again, I like how you have the agency to choose the silver bullet for long range, especially if they don't have a tracer or anybody like flying into your team. You can take that perk still. Or if you need to shut someone down, then taking the flashbang could be a solid option. Like right now, the hinder flashbang is already like pretty good, and this one would just be the hard stun version. I actually think at this current point in the game, with the way the game has evolved, it's a lot more of an acceptable choice. So for me personally, I think this is also a good answer to Vendetta without having to nerf her any more than you need to. Like you can still play Vendetta. You won't always have that hard stun flashbang available right away. If you bait it out, then he doesn't have the other perk and other options. I actually like this idea now. I'm not a CC hater. I know there's a lot of people in Overwatch who just hate having their abilities inhibited. That's why they hated the May freeze and they hate the brig stuns. And when they added the brig stun specifically onto the ultimate, it meant that like it wasn't always online and it felt more reasonable. And this is the same logic in my eyes, where everybody else has new mobility options and new power spikes with the perks, that only having it available like late into a round thanks to the major perk system. Okay with me. Okay, next hot take. Not being able to see what people swap to 15 seconds mechanic that they added, in the scoreboard, that they added to reduce counter swapping actually does nothing. And it just makes it harder to plan for the next fight when they do counter swap you. Nothing sucks more than seeing a good dive on Winston, but having to gamble if the swap you're seeing on the scoreboard is a Bastion or not. It's obviously a small thing, but I'm surprised it was never reverted. I mean, that's the exact reason why it was never reverted, right? You say it does nothing, but it does do something clearly here, because it makes it harder to re-counter the counter swap. The whole point of bringing it in was when people swapped, they would sit and spawn and just sit there and swap again. I think it was like the 5v5 tank matchup. Like they would just both sit and spawn. One person would go Zarya, the other one would swap to Winston. Then they see that, then they swap to Malga, and then they see the Malga and they swap to Orisa or something. And they would just be spawn swapping nonstop. So the 15 seconds gives you that buffer where like, okay, now you're wasting too much time. Now your team is fighting 4v4. Or like, you're down a tank because you're just sitting and playing counter swap Carl. But in any case, that's why it was never reverted. Moving on. Hot take, I actually think they'd make more money if they stopped making so many skin purchases temporary, or skins temporary purchases. Same goes for battle passes. In the finals, another game, for example, their battle passes are permanent and you can grind them anytime you want. It's just sad when you get into a game late and see all this amazing stuff you would have bought, but can't anymore, sometimes forever. Instead, everyone keeps trying to pressure consumers to get it before it's gone in hopes we'll feel a bit more loose on the purse strings. I mean, this is why it's a hot take. You think they would make more money, but that's just your hunch. I mean, objectively, the reason why they do it is because I'm sure it does not make them more money. It produces more money to add FOMO. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm just saying these are like companies with analytics teams on the finance and the business aspect. They probably calculated and crunched all the numbers, the min-maxing, the optimization. How much can we charge people for a skin before like the dip in the raw volume of purchases outweighs the price of it, et cetera, et cetera. These are like big corpo jobs that people take, data analysis and all things like that. So unfortunately, it's a choice between good PR, like in other games where you can buy battle passes at all times and get cosmetics at any time, and how happy players are in that sense versus the FOMO stuff they have now, or people will just conveniently not criticize them for something like this. That being said, loot boxes, which they added back, now do contain old battle pass and shop skins, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one way they've kind of nulled the pain a little bit of not getting all the FOMO cosmetics that you missed out on. So I guess that's their middle ground. Hot take: the devs really need to learn when something is just not salvageable. Holy wait, I agree with this. They've tried to get Sombra in a state where she was not completely useless, but not oppressive for nearly a decade now and have failed. Agreed. At this point, it's best to wipe their hands clean of this idea of Sombra and completely start anew. The Mirror Watch of Sombra is a far better version in every way. The idea of stealth in a video game is a hot topic. Every game likes to have stealth, but almost everybody universally hates playing against stealth-based heroes because it's so annoying when they just sneak up on you and just do stuff where you can't react and, you know, can't respond to such a thing. And I think it all comes down to the hero fantasy, which they're not trying to waver from, which is the idea of Sombra is the invisibility character. But how do we make invisibility good in a video game? That is something I don't know. In any case, the hot take is that they need to learn when something is not salvageable, and I feel like stealth in this hero shooter feels very unsalvageable for the majority of the player base. I personally don't mind it as much, maybe because I'm not always the target of Sombra. When I play support, she sometimes is there, but she has ways to kind of kick her out in the high levels where people focus her, and like you can see Sombra's win rate isn't even that great all in all, but she's very frustrating and annoying to play against for the majority of players. So that's where the loud voices come from. So I'm actually going to bring this hot take to the comments here. Which video game have you played, PvP, competitive multiplayer, where stealth is done right, where it doesn't feel annoying and the hero feels like pretty good to play at the same time? Because usually it's one or the other. It's so annoying to play against that she's always banned, or like that hero is always banned or never liked, or they're just, the stealth is so weak that it's just not fun for the players playing stealth. So that hero never gets picked anyway. Who does it right? And I want to kind of like read on a comment or a take on that and see if we can draw some ideas. Maybe then we'll put that in the suggestions box, the other format or video format we do on this channel, because I don't know how to answer that. Next, hot take: hero mastery courses and tower defense modes did not need to be removed entirely from the game. They could have added it to the rotation of arcade game modes, or at least accessible through custom games. I'm quite big on media conservation, trying to keep old games like VHS or Evolve alive, and the removal really saddened me to see. You know, I agree with this. I think they got rid of it because of the resource bloat and maybe to optimize like their game and file size, but I do think conservation and keeping it as like an accessible custom game mode would have been really cool to see, especially because it's like a lot of work and effort put into it, and like it was one of the reasons why I'm glad they conserved 2 CP assault modes like Hanamura, Volskaya in custom modes, even before they brought it back into arcade and into the quick play hacked rotation. It's always been accessible. And I remember whenever I did custom games of like 2 CP in 2023, people were like, whoa, you're still able to play this? I'm like, yeah, it was never removed in custom games. And I do agree, like keeping these things in those modes where it's not like prevalent to the casual player who just logs in and clicks 5v5 quick play every day, but someone who likes to try out old modes, it's always there for you. Now, I'm not sure if there's a middle ground to like keeping file size and everything clean and small. I don't know how big keeping an entire game mode is on the game file size, and that's just something an engineer would have to answer. But yeah, media conservation's dope. Hot take: get rid of demotion protection on divisions, but have a permanent one if you rank up. Like what Apex used to do, and Apex became a problem because people on protection would screw over teammates by dropping super hot, but things like that wouldn't happen in Overwatch. people on rank protection will still need to win, and there's a lot of people that will just stop playing if they reach a new rank for the first time. So when you solve one problem here, it just creates another. Unfortunately, there's no correct answer here. So you say get rid of demotion protection, but have a permanent rank if you actually hit the new threshold of ranks, and then people will just camp it, and then they can infinitely continuously lose. You say it won't happen in Overwatch. People can just rage like queue like 10 games in a row and never get demoted. Then you get a bulk of players where the rank distribution is just like super spiked on one rank because they can't fall out of it. I did play Apex for a while. I think it was like hitting Master, right? Before you hit Pred, once you hit Master 0 RP or whatever, you can never demote out of it. I was in there and I remember played 5 straight games and I was still at 0 and I'm like, well, I can't demote. Obviously my next win, I don't earn as much whatever point system it was, but it was just like, I didn't feel like there was much on the line for me anymore, and I was losing so much that I just kind of stopped playing. You said there's a lot of people that will just stop playing if they reach a new rank for the first time. People will also stop playing if they're kind of just like, the match quality will go down. Is actually a bigger takeaway point. If people are just at a rank where they know they can't demote out of, there's going to be, people can't drop super hot, but people can certainly throw and try out and experiment new heroes because they can't demote out of a rank. So no, I don't think so. All right, last hot take of the video. Perks have completely ruined the competitive integrity of the game. They should be kept in quick play only. Perks shouldn't power creep heroes as much as they do, and the overall perk balance between heroes is pretty lackluster. I'm a hardcore comp player and I've been playing Deadlock for a more competitive experience. Okay, first one, perks have completely ruined the competitive integrity of the game? No, I don't think so. They are a nice addition to the game, but they don't fundamentally change a lot of like the major macro of the game. A lot of times you can kind of get a sense of which perks are active, but it's totally viable to like switch your hero and not have any perk for a little bit versus somebody who does have both major perks. It's a slight disadvantage, but the swap, a major criticism was like people would feel like they were not incentivized to swap because they would lose both their perks. But the perks are a slight adjustment, but not big enough to completely make you not ever want to switch, is the point I'm trying to make. Now, that being said, their take about perk balance between heroes is a little lackluster. That can always certainly be refined. There are some heroes that just have perks that just don't feel like they're on the same power scale relative to other heroes in their specific role. So that part I agree with. I'm also a comp player. I don't like you. I don't really play quick play in this game. And I also have like 500 hours on Deadlock, and I understand, but Deadlock also has its faults for their competitive experience. There are some things that are just completely wacky and unbalanced. And people are going to look back in Deadlock 5 years later and be like, I can't believe we played the game with Cult to Sacrifice being this strong for that long. That item seems to be a little too insane. I think they should remove that one for competitive integrity, but here we are. That game is still getting iterated on, and hopefully the perks here in Overwatch are continually getting iterated on. But yeah, that's it for this week's hot takes. Leave some more in the comments. We'll add more to the pool. Thanks for listening to me yap. Goodbye.